Hi there, we are continuing on with Luke. We are in chapter 6 and reading from verse 27. Love for enemies. But I tell you who hear me, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who ill-treat you. If someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to him the other also. If someone takes your cloak, do not stop him from taking your tunic. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do unto you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Wow. This is a hard paragraph. This is a paragraph that I have found to be a principle and process that I've followed in my life quite a lot. And so if you ask me, who do I hate? There's nobody that I hate. There's nobody that I really can think of right now that I hate. There are people who do actions that are really hateful. And so certain leaders around the world, you can look at it and go, that is destructive, that is horrible. But I don't actively hate them. And then there's people that I probably feel more strongly about that are in my life, people that have hurt me, people that have said things about me, people that I've had conflict with. And again, there's nobody that I hate. And this principle, often through mentors and through people discipling me and through the conviction of the Holy Spirit, to be honest, is one that has come back to me again and again and again. And so I've ended up having coffee with potential people that could be my enemy. One or two of them I still don't particularly like necessarily. But there's been a lot of kind of peace made and friendships made out of those spaces. So I can really recommend this. And I think this is an easy paragraph to read, but not a good one, or not an easy one to take seriously. But it's a command. In Matthew 6, I think it is, Jesus is giving the Lord's Prayer, and he finishes it by saying, if you forgive people on earth, your Father in heaven will forgive them. But if you can't forgive people on earth, your Father in heaven cannot forgive them. And as much as it's such an interesting one to me, because that for me feels like an aspect of salvation, an aspect of like we need God's forgiveness, and here's something that is going to stop you from getting God's forgiveness. So does that mean you're one of the individuals that Paul talks about that just kind of scrapes into heaven? Or does it mean that this is something that can potentially lose you your salvation? And I think I lean more strongly towards that, because I think it's, if you cannot understand how forgiveness works, if you cannot understand what I, Jesus, am doing through God in order to forgive you, if there's no demonstration of seeing that understanding in how you treat other people, then I think it's like, how can you accept the forgiveness that I have for you? Like, you don't get it. And so this is serious stuff. And I think the first half we've all heard, well, many of us have probably heard when the theologians take the passages about striking on the other cheek, carrying the extra load and all that kind of thing. And there are political statements that Jesus was apparently making in those. But this is Luke what I see, so I'm not going to give you those. You've probably heard them. If not, you can find them on the internet, that when you allowed somebody to slap you on the other cheek, it actually humiliated them because they were only allowed to use one side of one fist. So go look that stuff up. But I think there's enough in here of things that jump out for me. I'm not doing an exegesis on every verse in here. I'm just reading and going, oh, that's interesting, that's challenging. And I like this because it has some different stuff. But it's not talking about not revenging. This is Jesus, as usual, turning things upside down, going like way ridiculous. How many times must I forgive people? 3 times? 7 times? No, 7 times 7. Or 77 times 7. Like all the times, like go crazy with forgiveness. This is the same thing, because it's not don't go kill your enemies. It's love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. So when you take the concept of doing good to those who hate you, it's really about actively seeking the good of people you don't like naturally, maybe not naturally inclined towards. And that doesn't come naturally to us. Revenge, I feel like, comes naturally to us. Someone does something bad to us, we want to do it back to them. If we think of ourselves as good people, then we might think that being neutral is about the highest bar we can have. And Jesus says, keep going. And it's phenomenal because it works. Like if you love your enemies effectively, you end up in a point where you don't have any enemies. So it really does work. The kingdom works, and that's something that's so significant. And what most of us don't get about the kingdom the whole time, it's not like Jesus is making, or God's making all these rules that are bad, like not murdering people, not lying to each other, putting God first in your life. Like these are all good things that work. When the kingdom operates, it works. The idea of Jubilee, like God's laws are good things. And we often get stuck into thinking that they're laws and designed to make us feel bad. And something like forgiving your enemies, doing good to your enemies feels like that. Why should I be? And it's not a fun thing. Like actively pursuing good with your enemies. And I feel like in my life I've had to be the one to do that. And that's so frustrating. It's like, can't my enemies pursue me? And there have been times when they have. But I think most of the time it's phoning someone, it's writing a letter to someone, it's giving someone a call saying like, okay, can we have coffee? Like, I really don't want to. I think you're a chomp face. I don't want to hang out with you. But God has told me to actively seek good with my enemies. I think of a guy in Joburg, Ryan, who I would like to say we're good friends now. I think he thinks the same. But there was a time when we, based on something else that happened in the past, like something happened and there was this thing, and then one of my good friends said, like, just like, I know him in a different way. Like, I know him, I know his heart, I know he's a good oak. And I'm like, that's not the guy I know. And Ryan and I went and had coffee together. And I saw who he was. I got a glimpse of who he was. And since that, I've seen other incidents, and I've been following him on social media and stuff. And now I'd say we're good friends. And he might not necessarily feel that same way about me, but I think he'd say we're friends at least. But it was that thing of just like the possibilities that emerge when we give an enemy space. And just the idea that if you think of your worst behavior, if you think of the worst thing you've said, if you think of the worst thing you've done, like if somebody only judged you on that, and I wrote a poem about this in the Philippines actually, if somebody's knowledge of you was only your worst moment, like would any of us get through that? Jesus would. But what if you were a crowd person and you only ever saw Jesus doing the woes against the Pharisees? What if you only ever saw Jesus saying, "Get thee away from me, Satan," to Peter, and you didn't understand the context? Like even Jesus, like in those cases, like if that was the only judgment you had of him, you might be going, and you'd be in the wrong. But it's that whole thing of like, everybody has the potential for good and evil in them. I think that everyone is made in the image of God, but everyone has the temptation of the evil one, and some of us give into it more often than others. But the potential of connecting with an enemy, of making a space, of having a coffee, of laying down weapons and saying, let's get to know each other. You don't have to be best friends with all your enemies, but what if there's that potential that with some of them it actually turns around? And I've seen it happen, and I've seen it happen more than once. And so I highly encourage it. I don't enjoy it. The next time I have to chat with somebody that I've called something on social media, whatever, I'm not going to run towards it. But I'm open to the possibility because I've seen that this kingdom thing works. This stuff is golden. Give to anyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. This is an extension of love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so the question people always ask is, but do you love yourself? Do to others as you would have them do to you. People like to be able to turn that one around. And then the other one, like if you love, as it continues, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Like everyone does that. It's something different. There's a shift that takes place when you go out of your way for someone that the world looks on and thinks you should just disregard, throw to the side and get rid of. And that's where the power starts to come in this. Here's something I do want to touch on, and I think a lot of people hearing, I don't think a lot of people are watching this video, but of those hearing, I think a lot of people need to hear this message. So I'd love for this to get to people. But verse 34, and if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? there's somewhere, I think it's in the Old Testament, where the Bible tells us to not add interest as followers of Jesus, as followers of God. In the Old Testament, it wouldn't have been followers of Jesus, I guess. And I don't know where that verse is now, but this is speaking to that as well. If you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners expecting to be repaid in full. Lend to them without expecting to get anything back. I believe that's a godly principle. And I believe that when you lend someone some money, you should always, like even if you are expecting it back, you should anticipate that you're not getting it back. And then if you get it back, it's a surprise. Or if you get it back, you can pay it on to someone else. But there's a godly perspective of not letting your help to somebody else put them in a further debt. And I think that's the thing. Like so much of our lending, banks, insurance, medical schemes, things like that, lending to people actually puts them into a worse situation than the actual need that they had, the actual problem they had. And as the church, we're terrible with this. Individuals in the church, people who lend money, like in families, lend money to people and in your mind be saying this is a gift. You don't have to tell them that. You can't tell them that. Just give money to people. That's cool too. But if you lend someone something to someone, just assume it's gone. Just let it go. Let that money be theirs. I think that's a godly principle. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. The way that I see and understand mercy is kind of like the opposite of the way I see and understand grace. Grace is a gift that is undeserved, unearned, something that God gives you just because, not because you were good enough, not because you earned it or anything like that. And mercy is not getting something you deserve. So you get pulled over for a traffic offense, the policeman says, just don't do it again, and he lets you go. Like, the law dictates that he should give you a fine. You deserve a fine. Reality says you should have a fine, but he shows you mercy. He lets you off without paying the fine. Be merciful as God is merciful. We see that in the story that Jesus talks about, the unmerciful servant, the guy who was forgiven a huge amount, and then went and took it out on the guy who earned him like such a small amount, because he didn't get the forgiveness of the debt. And I think that's where this comes from. If we truly understand the forgiveness of the debt of our sin towards God, our sin towards the world, our sin towards humanity, and how God just wipes that slate clean, like be merciful to others in light of the mercy that was shown to you. This is such a rich passage. I love it. It's Luke chapter 6, 27 to 36. Meditate on that. Share that with people. Share this video with people, because this is a fun one about not fun stuff. Making up with your enemies. So my challenge to you, I haven't been giving challenges, but the challenge to you is, do you know somebody who you would consider an enemy, or who would consider you an enemy? I want to challenge you to go make right, or to make the step towards making right. Drop them an email, send them a phone call, organize a coffee, maybe not in this time of lockdown if you're watching this during lockdown, but reach out to them and see if there's some common ground, see if there's a way of finding forgiveness, of finding peace, because it frees you from the bitterness which eats and destroys like a poison inside of you. This is powerful stuff. The kingdom is powerful when we put it into action. Do these things. Thanks for hanging out.